All right, coming up in just a few seconds, a special program on the oil heist. Oil heist in Guyana of the oil wealth funds. And we'll touch on that. We have Glenn Lal with us, we have Elson Lowe, and we have Roysdale Ford, Senior Counsel. So spread the word of this special program about what's about to happen tomorrow in Parliament.
This ain't a long time, this ain't a long time, this not a before time. This ain't a long time, this ain't a long time, this not a before time. This ain't a long time, this ain't a long time, this not a before time. Long time got them lang loji, now you got them bongolo. Long time got them lang loji, now you got them bongolo. This ain't a long time, this ain't a long time, this not a before time. This ain't a long time, this ain't a long time, this not a before time. Long time got them dirty down, now you got them concrete road. Long time got them dirty down, now you got them concrete road. Long time got them dirty down, now you got them concrete road. Long time got them dirty down, now you got them concrete road. This ain't a long time, this ain't a long time, this not a before time. This ain't a long time, this ain't a long time, this not a before time. Long time got them jug lamp, now you got them electric light. Long time got them jug lamp, now you got them electric light. This ain't a long time, this ain't a long time, this not a before time. This ain't a long time, this ain't a long time, this not a before time. Long time got them broad bottom, now you got them tight straight. Long time got them broad bottom, now you got them tight straight. Long time got them broad bottom, now you got them tight straight. Long time got them broad bottom, now you got them tight straight. This ain't a long time, this ain't a long time, this not a before time. This ain't a long time, this ain't a long time, this not a before time. Long time got them broad churia, now you got them bamboo jai. Long time got them broad churia, now you got them bamboo jai. Long time got them broad churia, now you got them bamboo jai. Long time got them broad churia, now you got them bamboo jai. This ain't a long time, this ain't a long time, this not a before time. This ain't a long time, this ain't a long time, this not a before time. Long time pulang bukit wata, now you got them overhead. Long time pulang bukit wata, now you got them overhead. Long time pulang bukit wata, now you got them overhead. Long time pulang bukit wata, now you got them overhead. This ain't a long time, this ain't a long time, this not a before time. This ain't a long time, this ain't a long time, this not a before time. This ain't a long time, this ain't a long time, this not a before time. This ain't a long time, this ain't a long time, this not a before time. Long time got them ulul man, now you got them yong guy. Long time got the ulul man, now you got them yong guy. This ain't a long time, this ain't a long time, this not a before time. This ain't a long time, this ain't a long time, this not a before time. This ain't a long time, this ain't a long time, this not a before time. This ain't a long time, this ain't a long time, this not a before time. Long time got them donkey cat, now you got them DeSoto. Long time got them donkey cat, now you got them DeSoto. Long time got them donkey cat, now you got them DeSoto. Long time got them donkey cat, now you got them DeSoto. This ain't a long time, this ain't a long time, this not a before time. This ain't a long time, this ain't a long time, this not a before time. This ain't a long time, this ain't a long time, this not a before time.
Giving our people greater access. This was a campaign promise. It was a campaign promise that we are going to have an amendment of this bill for a number of reasons. One, the old bill is unconstitutional and illegitimate. We seem to forget that this bill was passed by the Parliament in January 2019, after the no confidence motion has been approved. So the bill has no legitimacy.
All right, even as we set our time for 2 o'clock, which Glenn Lal will be on with us, Senior Counsel Roysdale Ford will be on with us, and Elson Lowe. And lo and behold, guess who is having a press conference right now as we speak, with just about 90 persons, 88, of course. And I just saw a link to Irfan Ali's press conference. He's talking about the illegitimacy of the previous administration on, and that is when the bill was actually passed. So listen for about 30 seconds of this guy's rantings.
Also had a number of fatal flaws in its content, which we had to rectify before the act could have been made operational. Now, what are these fatal flaws that the act has had inside? The governance structure. Let us start with the governance structure. It was severely deficient, with no governing body, such as a board of directors. The Santiago Principles require a governing body. So let's start from there. There was no governing body as is required by the Santiago Principles. If you have a company, the company has a board of directors.
All right, one of the things that we do is we listen to our folks. This is what we do here. We listen to our folks, and we don't want to, because and here is what's happening. We have Elson Lowe already with us. Here is what's happening. We know that it was deliberate. They know that these gentlemen are going to be on the show. Glenn Lal, the TikTok guy. We have the economist, Elson Lowe, and we have senior counsel Roysdale Ford. It's going to be with us as well. And so at 2 o'clock, they rushed to have some sort of a haphazard press conference to talk about the illegitimacy of that bill under what they term an illegitimate government. What made the coalition illegitimate? Only God knows. But what we know for a fact, based on evidence, that this current regime in Guyana is an illegitimate regime. They have been installed. But we are going to get into that shortly. Elson Lowe, good afternoon, sir. How are you?
Hi, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good to be on as always.
Yep, thank you. And we know that the elections are over as it pertains to the party's Congress. Congratulations on your bid. Regardless of the outcome, you did your best, and we wish you all the best in your future, all of your future endeavors. We'll talk about that some other time, though. You heard a little bit of what Mr. Irfan Ali just said in terms of this bill. What is your take? Take the first bite at that.
Listen, I think right now what you're seeing is an attempt to salvage things as momentum has grown for the postponement of this bill. I think that the PPP putting it just after the Christmas holidays is no mistake in an attempt to catch everybody while they were distracted by the holidays. And so now they're trying to rescue the ship before the bill is passed. But, obviously, one of the key things is that this needs substantial consultation, because this is one of the most important bills that we will ever see passed in Guyana. It governs the oil revenues, and it will have a huge impact on each and every Guyanese's life, direct impact. So we absolutely need to have proper consultations on this bill. But I think that I don't think that they'll be able to salvage any kind of credibility when it comes to this, because there are such absolutely glaring problems with this bill, and things that we 100% need to address. I can get into some of them, but they're very concerning. And I can tell you one thing, Mark, I have a background in investment banking. I was at Goldman Sachs. But what many people don't know is that I was at Goldman Sachs when Venezuela signed a substantial deal with them to borrow money to help them to push their economy when they were under pressure because oil revenues had fallen and so on and so forth. So I was there when Venezuela was on the precipice of its crisis and fell into its financial crisis on the back of having poor controls regarding the spending of oil and gas revenues. Venezuela attempted a sovereign wealth fund. Many people don't know this, but that was never a serious, really, attempt at a sovereign wealth fund. And as a result, they've got basically nothing saved and have run their economy to ruin. So we don't want that in Guyana at all. If you look at what's going on, there's a lot of Venezuelans in Guyana now that have fled the country because of poor economic policies, high inflation, lack of competitiveness of the businesses. But it's so severe that 6 million Venezuelans have left. Venezuela only has 28 million people. So what's it about? Almost a quarter of the population has fled because of poor management of the
let me ask you this, you being the economist that you are, and a lot of people probably need to better understand what this bill, how important is this bill. The fact that under the coalition government, a legitimate government, a government that was elected by the people and not installed, and so regardless of how Irfan and their Looney Tunes want to twist and turn it around, the coalition was a legitimate government. Now, having said that, can you break down how important is this fund, this sovereign funds, and the fact that then President Granger ensure that this fund, not a minister, not an official of the government, not even David Arthur Granger as president, could take his hands and push it into that funds. This is what Jack Day wants to do: take his hands whenever and just push it into that funds. And that is what David Granger, President Granger, avoided at all costs. Break down exactly what the PPP is attempting to do now with the
So
oil.
essentially, the purpose of having a sovereign wealth fund, ours is called the Natural Resources Fund, is to ensure that there are controls in place so that when a nation receives huge revenues from resources, those revenues are not wasted or are not misspent. The reason that this is such a concern is that quite often you see revenues being misspent and you see severe economic consequences from this. Venezuela is the biggest example, where, as I mentioned, about a quarter, give or take, of that population has fled because of poor management of resources. Now, Norway is the other end, where they have a very robust funds, and they've been able to save so much that they will eventually be able to fund entire elements of their governance in perpetuity, that is to say, forever, from their investments. And so I think they tend to use that to fund education and healthcare for all of the future, because they've managed those funds so well. So the purpose of the fund is to help to prevent severe consequences from poor management. Now, what are some of those severe consequences that we're worried about? The first one is that when the money from oil and gas revenues, as an example, is spent too quickly in an economy, if an economy is already small, as Guyana's is, it will cause extreme levels of inflation. Prices will go through the roof. So that one of the problems that you have in Venezuela is, if you're carrying money in a wheelbarrow, I'll give you an example. The wheelbarrow will be worth more than the money that's inside the wheelbarrow, right? Because the prices are rising so quickly that people can't do business, that money is not valuable anymore, and that destroys your entire economy. That's the first thing. The second thing is that you suffer from something called Dutch disease, which means that if you spend too much, your exchange rate will change and your businesses will not be competitive. Again, that destroys your economy. And in Venezuela, they suffered from a particularly severe version because they focused just on oil revenues and didn't develop other sectors of the economy effectively, right? And of course, part of the reason for that is that they didn't have a proper sovereign wealth fund to help to monitor and to help to put the brakes on the spending by the Venezuelan government.
Well, let me ask, Mr. Lowe, this particular move, this vindictive, this wicked, this corrupt move by the PPP, and Irfan Ali has embraced that. Irfan Ali has embraced that. Obviously, he had no other choice. But this simply means what Jack Day and Irfan they want to do. It gives them that power at any point in time to just push their hands into these funds right now, right?
The severity of this of what is going on is this. I've mentioned some real risks, some of the real tragedies that have occurred. The exact mechanisms to prevent those tragedies are the mechanisms that have been removed. So now the fund does not have any controls to stop us going in the direction of Venezuela. So that if they want to spend endlessly and send us down the pipe, they can do that. And if they want to steal endlessly while they're spending, if the PPP wants to do that, then they can do that. Two mechanisms were put in place by the coalition, which were strong mechanisms. The first being that there was a macroeconomic committee that is looking at these risks and ensuring that we are not over the line in terms of our risk of inflation, prices shooting through the roof, and our businesses not being competitive and the economy sinking. So we had a committee in place to look at that. But there's also a very comprehensive public oversight committee that the coalition put in place to, again, control these types of risks. The PPP has gutted that committee so that now all the committee basically does is receive reports on the fund and doesn't have any mandate to actually address the same risks that the fund is supposed to address. And so, at this point, it's almost as if we don't have a natural resources fund. They've cut out all of the important things. All of the reasons that the fund was put in place are being removed.
And that is very sad. I'm told that we have Glenn Lal. Mr. Glenn Lal is with us. No stranger to you guys. No stranger to those who are on TikTok also. Let's go straight to thank you, Glenn. And happy holidays to you and your family. I'm glad that you've taken time out of your busy schedule to be here, especially on TikTok as well. How are you doing, Glenn?
I'm doing fine. Thanks for those greetings, Mark. And I extend the same greetings to you, your panel, your viewers, and all the world, my friend. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much.
I always said, Mark, you can call me anytime. Once I have the time, I'll talk with you.
And you know what, Glenn, and you live up to your words, because every time I call you, you always answer and you're always prepared to come on. Thank you so much.
I barely get to hear a little of the gentleman's what he said just now on the NRF bill, or the old law we have. I would term it the old law that the coalition put in place, that this new government wants to repeal, wants to remove, wants to throw away. And I had to smile. If this country allowed that to pass tomorrow, with what they're going to replace it with, we're in trouble. This whole country is in trouble. I did a program just last week, and I show how Angola treated their NRF oil money. They throw away the Santiago principle and told the people that the money is Angola's money, and Angola and the government must have a right to spend this oil money. You know what they did? They remove the independent stakeholders who are supposed to be safeguarding and protecting not only the withdrawal of the funds, but also to give them advice on how to invest their oil money. Angola removed those people, and the president of Angola installed his own hand-picked people into those committees. And guess what happened? The minister of Angola went and withdraw 500 million American dollars out of their NRF fund and invested in a deep water port. When the media, and all in the name, the guy said, they said all in the name of investment for the people of Angola. Mark, when the media found out, dig down into the bottom of that 500 million investment, they found out that the Angolan minister took that 500 million US dollars and gave it to his best friend to build this deep water port. A man who never even built an outside latrine. And when the media went further into this investment, they found out that the people who's benefiting from this investment was the minister and the man who's heading the oil fund, the bank account. How you like that? How you like that, my friend?
People are listening to that, breaking down on that example.
And they went further. Man, this thing is so sickening what Angola did. And when you juxtapose what Angola has done, right? Guyana, tomorrow this law is going to put everything precisely what Angola did. And listen, the minister and the man who was heading the oil fund, they are not only the owner of the investment and the project. They went and bind, and this is the most important thing, Mark. They went and bind that investment to the state. Meaning, if that project collapses, okay, the owners, who's the minister and the man, and the head of the fund, they have to be paid for the remainder, for the life of that project. So they did not only steal the Angolans' oil money to invest into the project, they guarantee the project with state funds with the government. And guess what? There's no law. They have no law to jail these people. This is exactly what President Ali and Jagdeo is going to do with this new law, what they want to repeal tomorrow. Yeah, you know what? You know what? I just heard President Ali said that this new law, that the law President Granger put in, he put that in when the no confidence motion was passed. So that is not a law.
No,
This man,
Glenn, I just heard that. We just heard that. And it's not surprising that they came on the exact time that we scheduled this program. However, how does that equate to when Parliament was prorogued, right, by then President Donald Ramotar, and the oil was granted, oil deals were granted to their friends and their cronies?
well, exactly.
Mark, I can actually speak to that as someone coming from Sarah.
Okay, go ahead.
That was incredibly controversial and incredibly concerning because there was no proper oversight of those deals. And as you would know, some of those deals happened, a week before the change in government, in the month leading up to the change in government. Some of the companies, there's a question as to whether they were registered and so on. It was extremely concerning because without that kind of oversight, without the parliament being in place to scrutinize what is going on, you can have corruption in the country. And so this mirrors, this type of lack of oversight is exactly the problem in Guyana. And we need to ensure that we do not carry forward these bad practices.
Mm-hmm.
So as it concerns those oil blocks, the proroguement and then the awarding of them was very concerning.
Mm-hmm.
But I think in any country, if you're going to be awarding oil blocks shortly before an election, that would concern any country, because it seems always to be a questionable thing to do. So, that's an investigation that was carried out. The media has reported that the investigation was near its zenith, near being presented before court when Sarah was closed down. So from that perspective, it raises all sorts of questions as to
lots of
what
questions
happened when
indeed.
Sarah was closed down and what the intentions of the PPP were when they kind of closed off those types of investigations.
Thank you, but on the flip side, people may argue that 5 years it took. The coalition knew that Parliament was prorogued; those oil deals should not have been given.
Precisely.
Well, remember, those deals were given before the coalition was. The reason that there's such a cloud is that everything was done before the coalition could take office in the last week or two, which is what is so questionable.
More than questionable. We'll get back to that, Mr. Lowe. But Mr. Lal, what Mr. Irfan Ali just said, that because of the no confidence motion against the coalition government, that anything they did after that is illegal. Your take on that?
1 second. Before I get to that,
sure.
If President Ali is going to say that was illegal, then it's the same thing back with Ramotar. Ramotar sign away the oil blocks 4 days. 4 days before the election. And he was also paroled. Isn't that so?
They may argue that there's a difference between a parliament being prorogued and a no confidence motion, but the legal mind, Royce Ford should be joined shortly. Glenn, I'll continue on this whole oil.
Well, let me don't go on that topic because I'm not a legal mind.
Sure.
I want to go back on this law that President Ali is saying is not a law. But in the same breath, 1 minute he's saying that it is a law and he wants to repeal it because, and this is his words, the Minister of Finance have too much power. You hear that? He said that. And he's going to change it. Well, if he's going to change it, my question is, why is he not. I am told from a legal standpoint that when you're repealing or replacing a law, that should be the first line on the agenda. I am told that this new law they're going to repeal or replace, that is the line at the bottom of the entire document. So I would like somebody to explain that to me.
Calls for lots
Mark?
of explanation. Lots of explanation. Glenn, this thing is set to be called up in Parliament tomorrow, debated on, superficially, of course, because they have the majority, they will pass it. Again, I want you to break this whole thing down as to how dangerous this new bill is, this new law is for the entire Guyana, including PPP supporters. Yeah, we're not hearing you, Glenn.
Well, while Glenn is sorting out his mute, I don't know if he's on mute. I can just fill in another important point, which is that the board that is going to be running the fund is exclusively appointed by the president. So you can put whoever it is that he feels on this board,
Let
no
me
input
just
from the
pause for a
opposition
moment,
and
please,
so on.
Mr. Lowe, to have Glenn know that we're not hearing him. We're not hearing you, Glenn. And I'm sure it's at your end. We're still not hearing you, sir.
I think you might be muted.
Yeah. Go ahead, Mr. Lowe.
Yeah. So the board that's going to be governing the fund is exclusively appointed by the president. So you can put whoever it is he wants to put there. There's no input from other bodies and so on. And so we're really left at his discretion as to what happens. Even when we look at senior officials in this country, like the Chief Justice, the Chancellor, there are many senior positions where you have to have input from the opposition, even if it is not the opposition that presents the person. You have to have some sort of an input. This is a runaway train, and so this board, is really going to be able to do what it is that they really feel. And the other thing about it is the board's remit is rather narrow. So in terms of being able to properly reduce the impact of the risks that we talked about, I don't know that they can even do that. So it raises serious questions. What I think Glenn is also,
Glenn Lal mentioned earlier about Angola.
Yeah. So
Your take
I
on
can
that.
definitely reference that, because Angola is a situation where you had a president there for a prolonged period of time, and his daughter Isabella dos Santos became the richest woman in Africa, right? And her husband is actually quoted as saying that what's the problem? It's better that black people from Africa steal the money than white people come and steal the money. That's something that her husband has said, almost verbatim. And so that is incredibly disturbing, because if we're going to have these loose controls, then the president could put somebody on that management board who is going to engage in the types of transactions which are not appropriate within the law. There aren't any punishments for someone who engages in those types of things outside of the remit of the law. The committees that are there to monitor are just there to receive reports and have no real teeth to them. So it's just kind of open season as to what is going on. So we could see the types of questionable things like money being siphoned off and so on, because there aren't strong safeguards. So the president will put who he wants to put if the law is passed. And you know what? We have to hope to God that the person is an honest person. I mean,
Exactly, but we're not hearing that at all. What is your take again on the example that Irfan Ali gave? And his press conference is still ongoing with about 50 persons watching. That's not surprising. They use hundreds of millions of dollars, taxpayers' money, to prop up their propaganda network, and they just don't have the viewership or the listenership. Another example of a wasteful spending. But the fact that Irfan Ali has said that the previous administration, after the no confidence motion, and anything done after that would be deemed illegal. If that is the basis for this new bill, if that is the basis, then maybe we'll ask that question to Rice-Dale Ford, and there should be a court action leveled against the executive branch to prevent them, because that's not a good reason because the previous administration has not been deemed illegal under any legal circumstances.
Mark, I have a simple question. I am under the impression that monies were spent in the national budget after the no confidence motion. So if everything that happened after the no confidence motion is illegal, doesn't that mean that all the spending that occurred after no confidence motion is illegal? That's what he's saying. A huge amount of government spending is illegal. If that's the case, then sure, everything that happened for a whole year is illegal. But that argument doesn't hold up, because I think that if you're going to say that one thing is illegal and another thing is not illegal, it just makes it seem like you're manipulating the facts to suit your agenda. That's what the PPP is doing. I don't think anyone takes seriously the argument that it's not legal. I think that if that was the argument, then they would have ignored it altogether and put out of an act much earlier, and not been not operationalizing the act. The way that has been referred to over the course of the last years, they're not operationalizing, they're not using the act. Not that there's not any act. So these things are meant to deflect, but we can't allow them to distract from the very real concerns that they're presenting an act without any proper safeguards. When you look at the committees that were in place, their mandates were to look at the use of the revenues to see whether the use of the revenues was in the service of the country and preventing those risks that we talked about, risks of wrecking the entire economy. Now, the committees either do not exist or have such a narrow mandate that they have no teeth. Right now, the Public Accountability Committee, their mandate is a one line. The mandate is just a quick thought. Their mandate is not anything substantial, whereas in the past iteration of the law, they had substantial responsibilities. They were supposed to evaluate. You look at the actual membership. You had youth membership. You had membership from the University of Guyana, membership from women's groups. This is all to evaluate how we are using oil and gas revenues to ensure that all groups are able to benefit. If they use these revenues to rack up huge debt for future generations, there is no youth representative to say this is a problem and we should not be putting this on burdensome borrowing on the back of young people. That has been removed. So now anything can happen.
Anything can happen. We're joined again by Mr. Glenn Lal. Glenn, let's hope the connection is way better now, but continue on where you left off, sir.
Me talking to Mark?
Yes. You were about to say something before you cut.
You had asked me to expand a little on what this new law means for Guyana. Well, if we allow them to change what we already have, this safeguard and protection that David Granger put in place, and allow them to do what they want to do with that project, with that oil, little, for me, it's a little oil money, but it's all we get in so far. That is extremely dangerous for today and also future generations. What the leverage they're giving themselves, the latitude they're giving themselves there with this new law, Mark, what it means, they can go into that account and take out any amount of money, and they specify two things in which they can spend it on. They can spend the money on natural disaster, meaning if you get a flood, if you get a little high flooding, they can call that natural disaster. They can call anything you could think about, they could use as natural disaster and spend your money. You understand? Take out that money and spend it. They said they can also spend that money on green energy projects. Now, this is where the kicker hits in. This is where they will rob you blind of every single cent. Just like what many African nations have done, like Angola, with their deep water port. They are investing the money to benefit the people of Angola. But behind the scenes in the contracts, It's benefiting the private players. This is exactly what he is specifying. Jack Davis specifying that in this new law when he speaks about spending it on green energy projects. You know what that means? The gas to shore project is a green energy project. You hear what I did? Just last week they canceled Mark. That project began since when? Early last year. And they went out, they were asking for investors. Last week they said they canceled all the bids they received and how they're going to change. They're going to do this project differently. And guess what I said, doing it differently? They reserve the right, listen to this carefully, they reserve the right to negotiate with whoever they feel like negotiate with. You know what I mean? They could negotiate with a mother, they could negotiate with a brother, their sister, their father, and put that project together using that oil money. That's what they're basically telling Guyana. Because that is what they have been doing all the while. Not only now, but they are putting it into law. Remember, you guys got to remember this thing, The oil blocks were given away by both the PPP and the PNC. And you know what I said? No laws were broken. The oil contract was signed by Trotman. And you know what I said? No laws were broken. All these are laws, my friend. Now they're going to install a new law. So when they spend the oil money, when they thief the oil money, when they do whatever they want to do with the oil money, with their family and their friends, they are doing it legally. I am not a lawyer, but I'm telling you they are going to do it legally. And when the mess hit the fan, what will they say? They have done it legally and no laws were broken. Keep that behind your head, No laws were broken. This is why they are rushing through that law. We carried a story today on the other law, the local content policy. Okay? In which that law too, they're hustling. That law should have been in place since 2015, buddy. Since Guyana find oil, discover oil, that law should have been in place, that local content law, to put money in our pockets. We pumping oil 3 years now, 6 years after we found oil, and them still, I don't know if you can use the word, but pussyfooting with that bill. And they're hustling to push it through. But that's just a sham to get past, to get through with this NRF bill, this fund. But that one also has these both laws should have been in the open, so that the general public, my friend, all Guyanese should have able to peruse it, scrutinize it, check it, and let us put together a proper law that can govern our oil money. A law, a local content law in which all Guyanese can properly benefit when it comes to local content business. Am I clear? Was I cut off?
No, you were quite clear, Glenn. We are joined by attorney at law, senior counsel, that is, Royce Dale Ford with us. Royce Dale, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule. Let's get straight into this law set to be passed tomorrow by the PPP. Mr. Irfanali is arguing that the law was illegal because at the time it was passed, there was a no confidence motion level against the then coalition government, and therefore the law is illegal. Your take on that, Mr. Ford?
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me, Mark. Sorry for joining the show a bit late. Good afternoon, Glenn.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, Elson. Mark, that argument is absolutely without any merit. Absolutely without any merit. the court would have ruled repeatedly that even after the passage of the no confidence motion, that a government remained in place, that the cabinet still functioned under the Constitution of Guyana, and Parliament passed the law in the full competence of it. So that there's no substance to that argument.
Absolutely no
I'm not
substance.
coming in
Go
late
ahead.
into the discussion, so I'm not
Yeah.
sure what happened
Yeah.
transpired before so far.
So does
But
that
that is my view.
does that give the legal experts an opportunity now to prevent this bill from being passed?
No, Mark, we can't prevent the bill from being passed by resorting at this stage to court. The bill must be stopped. The bill must not be passed. And what is required is the Guyanese people to stand up. You know, we keep passing the buck. You know, one time it is the opposition fault and it's the PNC fault. Guyanese people ultimately would have to stand up. This is the greatest atrocity of our time. This is the greatest danger to the future generations of the people of this country. And I want to commend Mr. Glenn Lal for the position he's adopted repeatedly on this issue. Glenn and I, we have our differences in court and so on, representing people, but he has taken a heroic position, which is to say that this bill threatens the well-being of the Guyanese people. It threatens the future generations of Guyanese, and it must be stopped.
Okay, Glenn, before we get back to Mr. Lowe, there is
One second. May I 1 second?
Sure.
Thanks, Roydale. I kind of a little differ from Roydale on this part in which he says the Guyanese people. My friend, you cannot leave out the opposition. The opposition plays the greatest role. The opposition is the one who has to enlighten their supporters. This is issue we just can't leave to the Guyanese people, my friend. I am playing my role as the leader of a media house. I am going beyond the media. I'm going personally now. But you cannot just take out the opposition from this issue we are dealing with. That's just I wanted to add.
No, I'm not. I'm not taking out the opposition or taking out the PNC. What my point that I was making is that this is a broader issue than is limited to the welfare or the interests of the opposition only. This is an absolutely national issue, and there will be very few such issues, right, which would cut across party, cut across culture, cut across ethnic persuasions, orientations. This is one of the issues that would affect every single Guyanese, and that is why I put it out in that way. It's not to
Are you calling for national shutdown tomorrow?
Who, me?
Yes, you're calling for national shutdown tomorrow?
I am not afraid to say that. I believe that it's reached the point and stage of the country's interest and its well-being that the Guyanese people have to stand up. You know, one of the reasons why we find ourselves in the situation that we find ourselves in is because many of the right-thinking Guyanese people who are in a position to stand up and say wrong is wrong fail to do so. They simply fail to do so. And that is one of the problems with the society as a whole.
Roysdale, the reason I ask that, the nation needs leadership. And they need their party officials to be behind them. They're not going to run out there like ducks without head. They're looking for leadership. They're looking for to be guided. All right, that's all I'm saying.
Leadership to be guided. Elson Lowe, a massive protest is set for tomorrow. We'll get to that. We'll have Mr. Lal touch on that. But your take on the protest? Do you foresee real action and that the regime would listen to these people protesting?
Well, one of the important things I think we must also note is that this change in the law removes almost all of the civil society participation that was there. And so I've been personally reaching out to members of civil society to try to get them to stand up for their rights because they are being cut out of this law. As I mentioned, there was to be a youth representative, women's representative, representative from the University of Guyana, representative from the Extractive Industries Transparency Institute. These are all vital representation, all forms of representation that are vital in this law. And so I think that the protest will be important. I think that we need to have civil society step up their call for this law to be stopped and for us to have proper consultations, because they are the ones who are being excluded, and they need to recognize that they're the ones whose voices are being silenced. Even on a regional level, there was representation, and all of that has been stripped out. I give you another funny example. There's room for 3 religious leaders in this new Public Accountability Committee, but Guyana only has 3 religions. I don't know who told them that. So I think that this entire law, the way that it is formulated, has been done in a way where there's not been proper consultation. Because I believe that the Rastafarian community would have something to say if you're going to say that Guyana only has 3 religions. And so I think that I think that the civil society really needs to step to their call, because otherwise they'll be shut out. The law will proceed, and we'll just have to live with the consequences of mass theft and the economy potentially being absolutely wrecked.
Absolutely wrecked, especially under a guy who has experience in wrecking things, and that is Bharat Jagdeo, wrecking things. Mr. Lal, what is set for tomorrow's protest? Talk to the people.
I took it upon my own mark because of what I saw Angola and many African countries did, even Trinidad. And I am taking it upon myself, and I am going there myself to hold a placard asking that this new bill they want to pass tomorrow be held in bay, and let us have an open discussion on it. It's too serious to be passed in the dead of the night. The way I'm seeing how they're pushing this new law into place, it's like it is worse than kick down the door bandits. Kick down the door bandits operate in the wee hours of the morning. This is what they're doing. They have just laid that bill just in December 16, a few days ago, and ready to pass it tomorrow. So you can see the speed. And Royce is the right person. He's a lawyer. He's the right person to elaborate more on this. The speed. Why the speed?
Exactly.
Such an important issue. And guess
Why
what?
the speed?
And guess what?
Go ahead.
The most important part of this bill, of this new law, they're gonna pass, has no jail time for the people's wealth, the people of this country money, man.
Royce, why the haste? December 15, they gazetted this bill, this proposed bill, and now they want to rush it through. Your take, sir.
I believe that I can't get into the mind of the PPP, but I could provide what I believe is a rational explanation for their irrationality. And the reason being, I believe that the government is moving towards the new budget cycle, and they want to be able to bring that money from the Natural Resources Fund into the formal budgetary system of the country. And I believe that is one of the things that is pushing this mad haste to put their hands on this money. Ultimately, what we're going to see, if this bill passes, is to the detriment to the Guyanese people. We're going to see excessive spending beyond the capacity of the economy. We're going to see the rise of the Dutch disease. We're going to see inflation. We're going to see total mismanagement. And, when we meet to the question of mismanagement of resources and mismanagement of projects, the PPP has a long track record, a long trail of mismanagement of major projects. The most recent one being the Skeldon factory. And this is what you're going to be spending this money to. One of the important things about this bill, I don't know if Elson and Glenn mentioned it before. I don't want to keep repeating what they said. That's one of the problems of coming in late. The act previously provided a mechanism that if you decided to use money in the fund, that it had to be continuously earmarked in terms of the ultimate spending. When this bill comes into effect, that provision has gone. They could now take millions of dollars, billions of dollars, put it into the national budget, and you cannot tell where and what it has been spent on. You see, this is the sort of problems that we are going to have with this sort of bill. So when Bharat Jagdeo mentioned that his government, the PPP, favored the Kazakhstan model, you know what is happening there. When you read about Kazakhstan and you understand the political orientation of that country, when you understand the mismanagement and the criticisms from international financial institutions in relation to the management of that economy and the management of that fund, you know that we're going nowhere at all.
Absolutely. Before we get back to the other two gentlemen, I noticed a lot of comments. People are talking about filing an injunction, filing an injunction. You're the only lawyer here. Even though Glenn Lal is sounding like a lawyer, Elson Lowe is sounding like a lawyer. Let me ask you this, Senior Counsel Roysdale Ford. The legislative branch, no law says that an injunction can be filed to prevent the legislative branch from passing a law. Is that possible to stop these people right now? Because their argument is the law currently now, that bill was done illegally, when in fact it wasn't.
Mark, let us break this up. The first thing is that their argument that they could not bring this law because the first law was bad is hogwash. The second thing is that even if that is so, and that law is bad, the government, or this installed government as we refer to them as with justification, they would have failed to put in place the necessary consultation mechanisms to deal with such a fundamental issue. There is, as I said before, Mark, there's no greater issue in this country right now than the treatment, use, and protection of the oil resources of this country. This is an issue that will affect generations. It will affect generations positively if it is managed effectively, openly, in a transparent manner. And if it is mismanaged, dealt with behind the doors, on the tables, it will suffer the Guyanese people, suffer our children, suffer generations to come. Now,
Well,
when
let me
we
say
get
this
back
to
to
you.
the question of...
Go ahead, Mr.
Sorry, you
Ford.
go, Mark.
My apologies. Go ahead.
No, you
ahead,
go,
sir.
Mark. You go.
No, I was just about to say that all of what you said is correct, especially in the hands of this guy, Bharat Jagdeo. Let's see, Mr. Lal, you want to say something great? Go ahead.
Yes, I just want to add a little to what Roysdale said there just now. Roysdale, you talked about they are eyeing that money for the budget. I don't think that's where they want to spend the money. They specifically state how they plan to use the money in two things only. They're going to spend the money on green projects, right, and on natural disasters. But it goes beyond there. The green projects alone will finish the money overnight, like bang, bang, bang. It goes beyond there with this law, this new law that they are going to pass. It will give them the ability to use that fund, that account, that oil account, to borrow. You hear me? I want you to understand what I'm saying clearly, They will use that account to borrow money to thief, to spend on projects, or to bring into the economy, into the budget spending. It's borrowing, they want to borrow. So it means that they will be borrowing and spend, do what they want to do with it. And every cent that comes from your oil, as fast as it's going to the account, it has to go to pay on loans. You get me clearly, Mark Metcalf?
Loud and clear.
Very clear? They are going to pawn your account. They're going to, it's like pawning your house or pawning your car. Taking money on that. So when the money comes in from the oil, it goes towards repaying. That's how evil this law is. It's not only to spend on these projects, but they're going to place that account on a lien. with funds.
And
they
that
can
is why
they can take, Mark, they can go and borrow by the billions on that account. And that is the danger. Not only we, this living generation, face, but future generations will end up owing those loans. So it means that the little oil money will forever be going in that account to pay the loans what this administration grab up.
loans and loans and loans and loans.
That's how dangerous.
That is why Glenn Lal equated to the kick down the door banditry, the high class banditry. And if you look at what is happening, anything this guy touches, any single thing, he destroys it, destroys the economy, destroys a nation, destroys a party, destroy a country, destroy people. Let's go to Mr.
One second, Mark. I came out Christmas Day to do a special program. It will re-air tonight at 7:20 on the Kaicho radio, and tomorrow again. I played it every day so that people can get a full understanding of what's happening, where they're really taking this country with that oil account. It's extreme. It's the most dangerous thing Guyana will ever see. You know what is it to spend this money and nobody is held accountable, man? Man, something is wrong here, man. Something is definitely wrong. You are going to spend out the people's oil money. How you feel like, when you feel like, and on what you feel like, with who you feel like. And you telling me that there's no law to jail anybody? Come on, guys. Come on, Mark Benchcap. Something is wrong with Guyana.
I want to ask, indeed, Glenn, Mr. Lowe, your 2 cents in this, please.
No, I definitely agree with Mr. Lal on that. And I can tell you, as I said at the beginning of the program, when I was at Goldman Sachs, I saw Venezuela take out a huge loan. And that was when Venezuela was getting into the depths of its crisis. These sorts of huge loans where you can't pay back, where you use the oil as collateral, it facilitates spending through the roof, and you wreck the economy. That is exactly what I saw happen before my very eyes. And it's like a nightmare. You're here in Guyana, and you never thought you'd see something as crazy as that. But it's the same thing all over again. They can use the monies from the oil to service their loans and take out loans that are 10 times, 20 times as much as the revenue. And so if you have 500 million US there, boom, $5 billion in loans, $10 billion in loans, and pump that into the economy. And because the committees that were supposed to be there to monitor whether this is destroying the economy have been removed, we're now open to the complete destruction of the economy in the same way that Venezuela was open to the destruction of the economy. And so I'm seeing, as I'm saying, the same thing here in Guyana that I saw in Venezuela when they were taking out loans from Goldman Sachs. This is unacceptable, and we really need to put in place some serious changes, because otherwise, I'll tell you another thing. Gaisuco strikes a lot. You think that they're not going to spend endless monies on Gaisuco when they have endless monies available to spend? It's going to keep going on and on and on. And even these infrastructure projects, we've seen infrastructure projects cost balloon in this country. We're already seeing the current gas to shore project costs go through the roof. What percentage of that, we have to investigate? It might be involved in corruption. So there's borrowing, and then there's loss from theft. And on top of all of this, you know what happens when you borrow? You have to pay interest. So there's also a loss to the country from the interest payments, which can be huge. It got so bad in Venezuela that China didn't even want to lend them any more money. Russia was the only country willing to lend them any money. And they started to pawn off entire oil blocks, essentially, so that they could try and get some funds to keep running the economy. That is exactly where we're headed if we don't have the right controls in place.
And that is why, good points made, Mr. Lowe. Good points. That is why Glenn Lal will be out there tomorrow to stand up. I hope other Guyanese, other folks will join with him. Quickly, Glenn. Go ahead, Glenn. Go ahead.
May I not share what Mr. Lowe just said here? What the international financial institutions is doing? They're like waiting, Candy Crows, waiting to throw money at you, to indebt you, to grab you there. because they already figure out in their mind how much oil Guyana has out there. They don't do the figures, the mathematics, and understand in 20, 30 years, Guyana will be getting 10 billion, 10 billion in their oil. Okay? They're going to give you 12 billion. So you will forever owe them. Our children and grandchildren and future generations will continue to owe these foreign financial institutions. You know what Jacques Chirac said 3 years ago, the president of France? He said, if it wasn't for Africa France collecting 500 billion a year in debts owed to France, if it wasn't for that loan, France would have already been a third world country several years now. And that's exactly where Guyana is pushing itself. That's where Jagdev Ali is, and the opposition is taking Guyana in that same direction, that same road, where future generations will be working to pay them.
Dark road indeed. Dark road indeed. It must be stopped by every legal means necessary. Mr. Roysdale Ford, if you can briefly break down, being the legal mind here, when Parliament is prorogued compared to when a no confidence motion has been passed against a government. Are they any difference?
Yes, Mark. When a no confidence motion would have been passed, that brings to an end in terms of the overall structure of the law. That brings to an end the life of that government, and it triggers an election. It does not bring to an end the continued existence of that government until an election is held and that government is no longer in place. When a government, when there's a prorogation, the entire parliamentary system comes to an end, no further laws will take place, and Parliament cannot function thereafter. So there's a substantial variation or distinction between the two. You know, Mark, coming back to the question of the excessive borrowing, I agree with how it was being put over by Mr. Lal and Mr. Ellison. But you know, very early into this new government, they did a number of things which are very important. Very early, they telegraphed these shots by increasing the debt ceiling and borrowing ceilings for the country to points and levels at which, even with all the oil and even with the level of oil that we have now, it was almost not sustainable. So we see the continuous revelation of a dangerous and diabolic scheme, which is really being unfolded. Tomorrow we see the full culmination of that plan. But we will see, if it goes ahead, Mark, great gnashing and crying in this country.
Well, let me ask you this, though, before we head to wrap up time. Let me ask you this, Senior Counsel and Member of Parliament Roysdale Ford. Without telegraphing much of your shots, what do you guys, as the opposition, intend to do in Parliament tomorrow?
Mark, tomorrow, without telegraphing a lot, let me put it this way. We intend to oppose in the strongest, in the widest, and the most graphic of terms our opposition, and to voice our opposition tomorrow in and out of Parliament tomorrow.
And that's it. Thank you. And so you also agree that there should be a national shutdown tomorrow?
Yes, Mark, I believe that. You know, Mark, I was reflecting on the bill, right? And I made a note, you know, that for perpetuity, so I could pass on to my grandchildren and great-grandchildren how I felt at this moment, you know. I do this from time to time because sometimes we forget that we only live for a short period. And about 100 years from now, if this thing goes wrong, there will be Fords around wondering how the grandfather or great-grandfather was in Parliament and what and how did he feel. And Mark, I made a little note, you know, and this is what I said, that this is an assault on the Guyanese people and is an assault on the future generations of the Guyanese people. And for this bill even for it to be conceived in its current format, demonstrates this government disdain and disrespect and total contempt that the government has for the Guyanese people. You know, we've spoken about it. We've spoken about it at length. You have done it before I joined you belatedly on the show. Mark, there's no, as I said before, I really believe there's no greater issue right now um, at this point. And whilst we're going to have consultations, and we hope that the government will not proceed with the bill tomorrow, we have consultations. I believe that we probably gone past consultations on this issue. I believe that it is of so much of a national importance that whatever law we ultimately agree on, because of the importance of it that it will play in the lives of generations of Guyanese to come, that law must not just simply be passed by one parliament and be capable of being passed by a next government and then change again, fluctuating with the winds and fancies of politicians. That is one of the things that about a natural resource fund or a sovereign wealth fund. It's supposed to be sacred. And I would be like to have that sort of bill included as a special amendment to the Constitution. So it can't be changed willy-nilly. You see, Mark, you asked earlier about going to court and stopping Parliament from functioning and filing different actions and so on. The way in which Parliament as a body is limited is by the Constitution. Parliament cannot change this because you need so many votes. But any other piece of legislation, no matter how important it is, it can be changed simply by a majority of the people in the National Assembly sitting down at any point in time. So we could go through this immaculate process of consultation, deep-seated, deep-rooted process, and a year from now, Parliament decides they want to change the law again. So I favor that sort of embedding what would be the ultimate national consensus and agreement into a document like the Constitution. I also believe that we shouldn't just simply have a consultation. We should have a sort of referendum or on where the Guyanese people go out and vote and say, listen, this is what we want. We want a bill following the Kazakhstan model with 95 people who could suffer and run away with all the money. Guyanese people like that. Yes, 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 yes. Right? Or we don't like that. We want a bill where we're going to get people who could thief and then go to jail. We want to be involved in this, involved in that. You see, Mark, in a constitutional system, there's a limit to what a government could do really in terms of what is the authorized will of the people. Not everything a government do express the will of the people, and that is why constitutions like ours contemplate the possibility of referendums and decisions on matters. And this is the sort of matters that should go to the ordinary citizen to make a decision on. So it's not just about consultation. It's about consultation plus education plus expression of a particular will of the Guyanese people in a particular way. And when we finish that process, put it in the Constitution, cement it, that it can't be changed willy-nilly by the ordinary whims and fancies of Parliament and any group of people who decided they're going to be parliamentarians 20 years from now and screw up it for generations of Guyanese to people to come. I believe this is the sort of change that I stand for. This is the sort of change that I will be. I'm not listed to speak on the bill tomorrow, but this is the sort of change and position that I believe should ultimately be adopted. I don't know if Mr. Lal or Elson has a different view, but we have to get to the point. You see, when we get to the point of having clearly understood what it is that the Guyanese people want, nobody can come assess on behalf of people at this point. Let us have our consultations, go Matthews Ridge all over, go through the process. This is what the two options are, or this is the middle ground. Educate the people, civil society involved, then let the people go and express that by a vote. This is, Mark, this thing is so important. It is so important. If we get this wrong, we might as well just close off the lights in Guyana and mash up the place and done.
Yeah.
It is
Well,
the end. There's no
it
coming
looks
back.
as though it's heading in that direction in terms of going all the wrong way with this bill. They are bent on having it passed. How, from a legal standpoint, it is stopped. I'm not saying heading to the courts or whatever. People have a right, a constitutional right, to do what Glenn Lal is doing tomorrow morning, to go out, stand up, and protest. Not 5 persons, not 10 persons, probably 10,000. I don't know, but I want to get the closing remarks of you gentlemen. I'd leave Glenn Lal for last. Let's go to Mr. Lowe first.
Thank you, Mark. So, again, we are reiterating the seriousness of this bill, which is potentially the most important that has been passed in the entire country's history and will shape the future of Guyana. Really will shape the future of Guyana. We can have a prosperous nation. We can see benefits, growth, good infrastructure, and well educated people. Or we can be in the depths where you have 25-30% of the country fleeing because of poor economic management. People forget Venezuela has the most oil of any country, but because of poor management, the country is in the depths, and we're seeing the negative effects of this. I always say if you give Venezuela more oil, things would get worse. We don't want Guyana to turn out to be a country where the more oil we find, the worse things get in the country. We need to do better than that as a society. And this act needs to be changed so that going forward, we have the right controls in place. I want to call again on members of civil society: stand up for your rights. You are being excluded. Your role is being diminished to just collecting reports, essentially. You need to really raise your voice, whether or not you support the PPP, whether or not your membership supports the PPP. Rather, you need to come together and stand up for your rights, because otherwise you'll be left on the backward end of history and asking yourself, what could I have done to ensure that we actually were able to positively impact this country. And so, tomorrow is a big day. I want to urge everyone to try and do their utmost to stop this, whether it is protesting, whether it is writing, whether it is taking to social media. Because if we don't do that, what's going to happen is endless spending, endless corruption, and you blink twice, and all of a sudden you'll look like Venezuela or Angola or Equatorial Guinea, and the country will be in ruin. We have, we've fought many times for Ghana in many different ways. Don't let's give up the most important fight at the most critical time. So thank you for having me on the program, Mark, and I want to leave your viewers with that.
Well said, Mr. Lowe. Appreciate it. I don't know how accurate this is, but I'm seeing some reports that there's a bomb scare at the Arthur Cham Convention Center right now. I don't know if this is a hoax coming out from the PPP propaganda sites or whatever, but I don't know what's happening there. But I just thought that I bring that to the people's attention. Like I've said, I'm leaving Glenn Lal for last, but let's just get a brief closing remarks, very brief, from Senior Counsel Roysdale Ford. In your remarks this morning, former Finance Minister Winston Jordan got placed on $3 million bail. Close off, Mr. Ford, please.
Yes, Mark. Dealing with that issue, Mr. Jordan was placed on $3 million bail. I believe that the bail was excessive, but he paid the bill, and today he's free and is home resting, where he ought to be with his family. Mark, the issues related to the charge, I believe that they were without any merit, without any substance. I believe it's another manifestation of the perpetuation of persecution of former ministers and former executives or members of government who would have served under the Apple AFC. So Mark, we see the continuation of that sort of approach to governance, the sort of approach to issues. We will defend that matter in court, and I don't want to say much more on it at that stage.
Sure.
Only at the stage when it gets up in court a bit more. But I wish to assure the people that Mr. Jordan, based on what I would have seen, would have committed no wrongdoing in relation to the fact that this was a decision of cabinet. Whether it is right or wrong, Mr. Jordan ought not to have been charged for acting pursuant to to a decision of cabinet. Mark, I believe that I've expressed my views on the main issue of the day, which is really and truly the natural resource fund bill that the government intends to bring tomorrow. I believe charging Mr. Jordan today is meant to be a little distraction
Exactly.
from the issue of tomorrow. And that is what we have to deal with. And you know, one of the fiercest critics, apart from Mr. Lal, would have been Mr. Jordan himself in relation to the sort of work that would have gone into the bill. You know, we have to give Mr. Jordan some props. The Natural Resource Fund bill, I've read, the existing act, I've read, would have had its critics and its criticisms. But the bill that ultimately became the current act was a measure and a scheme to put in place a system by which there would be transparency, there would have been measured spending, there would have been a management arrangement, at least in which every single Guyanese would have known what is happening. So I believe this bill again, Mark, points out the difference in the two orientations between the APNU AFC and the PPPC in relation to the wealth and the management of the wealth in this country. Mark, as I've said earlier, I believe that we must have this bill stopped. There must be widespread consultation. It must be an education process, even in relating to what a natural resource fund is, what a sovereign wealth fund is, and how it impacts the ordinary life of the Guyanese people. And let them, after that process, make the decisions. I believe that this is too an important matter to be made by 65 people, no matter how well intentioned they are, no matter how well educated they are, to make a matter of such national importance, of such intergenerational consequences, to just 65 people to decide by themselves what is the best way to figure this thing out. I believe that APNU AFC would have done a commendable job in terms of trying to put in place the basic framework, but what is coming now to wipe that out is totally frightening. I would like to see a process of consultation, education, expression of the will of the Guyanese people through some plebiscite, through some mechanism, through some referendum that signals their commitment and acceptance of a particular position and have that put in law. Thank you very much.
Hey, thank you so much, Mr. Royce Ford, for taking time out of your busy schedule. Again, happy holidays to you, your family. Same to Mr. Lowe. But I want you guys to remain whilst we sit quietly and listen to Mr. Glenn Lal, the man who has been tick-tocking. And the tick-tocking seems to be getting to Jack Dale's head. And Glenn, your closing remarks. Take it.
You know, Mark, Rosedale, and Mr. Lowe, it was good having you guys on board here. A beautiful discussion. I want to tell you, Mark, that politicians in this country have noticed has a pattern. Whenever they want to do their evil, their wicked things, they always find a smoke screen. And charging Winston Jordan today is a smoke screen to change the headlines tomorrow. Bet you Jordan will be on all the headlines tomorrow as the lead story, rather than this law that is going to in-depth generations to come. Any bets on that?
No, I'll bet you, Glenn. 1 second. I'll bet you a bottle of wine that is not going to be on the headline of Kaito News tomorrow.
No, not Kaito News. Not Kaito News. But I want to tell you guys something. We should have had policies and laws in place, Mark, from the moment we discover oil. From the time Guyana says, hey, we have oil. We should have had policies to safeguard and protect we. We should have had laws to safeguard our oil blocks, our contracts, we should have had laws for the relinquishment of these oil blocks that is placed illegally in those people's hands. What they were supposed to hand back to Guyana. Guess what? Those are the kind of issues this country, the lawmakers of this land should have been focusing on to bring in billions of American dollars. Instead, look at these low-life leaders we have. This is why I cannot look at them and have any regard or respect for them. All they can see is a few penny. The few penny we are getting in the millions, man. 2019 to now we have what, $500 or $600 million? That is what they are going to pass laws to snatch and to thief out for themselves and their family. Rather than putting in laws that can rake in billions of American dollars, they should have tried to get laws to change what they have granted ExxonMobil in Parliament, not to pay any taxes in this land. In 2019 alone, Mark, Guyana gave ExxonMobil 700 million American dollars. Not Glenn Lal said that. The GRA boss said that. Through the Auditor General 2019 report, it's there. We reported on that a month ago. 700 million in taxes alone we give away. Laws should have been put in place to rectify and correct those things, Mark. Instead, these leaders, they're hustling to put laws that only allows them to steal, and to steal without going into jail for a day. You gotta love these leaders, eh? You gotta love these leaders of this land. Laws that should have had, I agree with Roysdale, national consultation. But they follow ExxonMobil because ExxonMobil had a consultation on the fourth project. They go in and push down the throat. They give us 7,400 pages of technical data to study within these to have a national consultation. This is what Jack David is doing to us, From the 16th to now, they give us this document to study, and they're going to pass the law tomorrow. This is a beautiful land. I love this land. Happy holidays to all of you.
So, Glenn, tomorrow morning, what time are you going to? What time are you going to do?
Just now, and I'm going to continue doing my program every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, an hour. Jack Dave called me. He said that I have no scientific facts or analysis of what I say. Man, I love what he said. I'll deal with him. I'll deal with him come first Monday in 2020.
Look, Glenn, before you go.
Yes, you asked the question about tomorrow.
What time tomorrow?
Tomorrow I am going out there 10 o'clock in the morning to voice my recognition there. I'm going to say what I have to say on a piece of placard there.
And that's at the Otachong Convention Center there.
I think all Guyana should come out. And if you can't come out there, at least come out on your bridge. Come out, call out your neighbors, and stand up on the road and discuss this issue, because it is the most serious issue. Like I said, they're going not only to spend the few cents that we will be collecting from that oil money. We will be collecting big money. Trust me, we will be collecting big money, but only with a change. And a change, we have to get that. But the law they're going to pass there will allow them to in-depth future generations, and that is the most important evil any government can do to its people. Once again, guys, happy holidays.
All right. Thank you so much, Glenn. Happy holidays to you and your family. 2021 will be the year of TikToking, because I will join you by TikToking too. I don't know how to TikTok, Glenn, but I will be TikToking too. Right? Gentlemen, thank you all so much. Glenn, when is your program on again?
Tonight, 7:20. Tonight, 7:20. You need to listen to tonight, 7:20.
7:20 tonight on Glenn Lal's radio. We may carry that
99.1, 99.5 FM.
Yeah, thank you so much, Glenn. Thank you so much. God bless you guys.
Good being on with you.
Thank you. All right. Glenn Lal there, Roysdale Ford, and Elson Lowe. Tomorrow, Glenn is going to be there at the Otachong Convention Center. He's calling on folks to be there as well. I do hope people do turn out at that peaceful protest. That is what it's about, standing up and saying no to that draconian bill, that would allow this guy right there, to dip his hands into that fund and take as much money out of it for his friends and his cronies. He's going to probably sprinkle some crumbs to the ordinary people, but they just need to be stopped by every and any legal, mind you, any legal means necessary. And tomorrow I do hope to see folks with boots on the ground. Boots on the ground, not about just talking about a protest, not about sitting in front of your keyboard and typing or whatever. I know some who are away can do that, and I salute those individuals and their bravery. But those who are on the ground, let us hope that they put boots on the ground, not on social media and all the nonsense in terms of fighting on social media and these things, on the ground. Now, when I talk about fighting, I mean a political fight, not a physical fight. This sort of fight ought to happen on the ground. Put your boots on. Go in front of the Arthur Chung Convention Center tomorrow and let the PPP know that enough is enough. And of course, we here at 107.1 FM, we want people to do it very peacefully, legally. Your constitutional rights are guaranteed there. Just be peaceful, put your boots on the ground, and get the ball rolling. Thank you for tuning in for this special program about the theft of the oil money by Jack Dio and his cronies. In closing, Irfan Ali rushed to do a press conference just at the time that we started. He had about 75, 80 persons who were watching. And again, this is how they spend hundreds of millions of dollars, your tax dollars, to spread their propaganda messages around, but it is not working. The propaganda is not working. We at 107.1 FM and other social media commentators, I am sure we are here to stay and to confront the ills of this installed PPP regime. Thank you, Glenn Lal, for what you're doing. Glenn Lal and I don't see eye to eye on everything. There are times we disagree with each other. We abuse out each other. And I say this to say that when it comes to the national interest, the interest of the country, differences should be placed aside. And those politicians who remain vindictive and vex and all these manner of things, and the opposition ones, mind you, they need to get their acts together, because the nation is going to be taken into a dark, dark tunnel as of tomorrow. Maybe more boots on the ground is needed. I'll see you guys later on this evening, right here on 107.1 FM. Thank you all. God bless you. And God knows, God bless our beautiful, beautiful country, Guyana. Until this evening, so long.
She put a pot on she hair and gone. Them a the first one out on the dam. Basket on she head, bucket in each hand. Hold up on she frock, I wanna she grandson. To the market, them a go. For the morning, the day is dawning. For cockacrow to give the villagers a warning. Rise and shine, the birds them a sing. All animal take turn as them join in the waking. Cockacrow, dagabag, donkey, bray, horse, and they even duck a quack. Cockacrow, dagabag, donkey, bray, horse, and they even duck a quack. Come and hear this sweet story that tell the people about life in the country. All day a back down, me now I come home. Inaga, jackass yard for fetchy load. Cockle Cheyenne, bag over shoulder, running by his side, a Rexy and Rover. From the farm, them a come. Sun a go down, but up the river. Some washing clothes, some folks are bathing at the water. Fisherman, they catch them a bring. From a canoe boat, man, them start a